Welcome back to Growth Mindset Company, where we turn complex contract clauses into easy-to-understand concepts for professionals and enthusiasts alike. Today, we're diving into a critical component of construction contracts that can make or break a project's success: the design clause. In the world of construction, the blueprint for success starts with a solid foundation in design. Clause 5.0 of the FIDIC Yellow Book 1999 is the cornerstone of this foundation, outlining the obligations, standards, and procedures that govern the design process in a construction contract. Whether you're a seasoned contractor, an aspiring engineer, or a curious learner, understanding the intricacies of Clause 5.0 is crucial. It's not just about creating a structure that stands tall. It's about ensuring that every line drawn, every calculation made, and every detail considered aligns with the stringent standards of international best practices. From the general design obligations to the submission of as-built documents, each subclause we'll explore today serves as a guidepost for navigating the complex journey from concept to construction. We'll dissect the roles and responsibilities that the FIDIC Yellow Book places on the contractor, the engineer, and the employer, ensuring that you walk away with a clear understanding of what it takes to design not just for the present, but for a sustainable future. So grab your hard hats and notepads, and let's build our knowledge together. Join me as we lay the groundwork for excellence in design, clause by clause, concept by concept, right here on Growth Mindset Company. We have prepared some flowcharts to give you the crisp knowledge and understanding of the entire Clause 5 design, so you can survive out there in the real world. Firstly, I have separated the flowchart for each clause, and then have combined into one single flowchart. You can find all the relevant material at the website mentioned below in the description. All the best. So let's begin. Moving on to Clause 5.1 General Design Obligations Flowchart. Starting node. Clause 5.1 General Design Obligations. This is where we begin to explore the responsibilities and processes related to the design of the works, as outlined in the contract. Next is contractor's responsibility for design. The contractor is in charge of the design of the project. This means they must ensure the design is completed and meets the required standards. Next is designed by qualified designers. The contractor must use qualified designers for the design work. These designers should be professionals like engineers who meet any specific requirements mentioned by the employer. Next is submission to engineer for consent. The contractor needs to get the engineer's consent for each designer and design subcontractor they plan to use. They do this by submitting the names and details of these professionals to the engineer. Next is contractor's warrant of experience and capability. The contractor guarantees that their designers, and subcontractors are experienced and capable of designing the works. Next is designer's availability for discussion. The designers must be available to discuss the design with the engineer when needed, up until the end of a period known as the defects notification period. This is a time after the project is completed when any defects should be reported. Next is scrutinize employer's requirements upon commencement notice. When the contractor is told to start the works, they must carefully check the employer's requirements, which include design criteria and calculations. Next is notify engineer of errors in employer's requirements. If the contractor finds any mistakes or issues in the employer's requirements, they must inform the engineer within a specific time frame. Next is error found. This is a decision point. If the contractor has found an error in the employer's requirements, the process moves to the next step. If not, the process moves towards completion without any changes. Next is engineer determines application of Clause 13. If there is an error, the engineer must decide whether to apply Clause 13, which could involve changes to the contract, variations, and adjustments. Next is error due to contractor's negligence. Another decision point. The engineer must determine if the error was something the contractor should have noticed before they submitted their tender bid for the contract. If yes, it suggests negligence on the contractor's part. Next is no time cost adjustment. If the error was due to the contractor's negligence, there will be no extra time given to complete the project, nor will there be any increase in the payment the contractor receives. Next is time cost adjustment possible. If the error was not due to the contractor's negligence, there might be an adjustment to the completion time and the contract price. Last note is, this is the conclusion of the process. Depending on the previous steps, the project will proceed with or without adjustments to the contract. Moving on to Clause 5.2 Contractors Documents Flowchart. Starting node. Clause 5.2 Contractors Documents. This is where we begin understanding the contractor's obligations regarding the documents they must provide. Next is Contractors Documents defined. The contractor's documents include all the technical documents that the employer has listed as requirements, as well as documents needed for legal approvals, as-built documents, and operation and maintenance manuals. Next is documents written in defined language. The contractor must write all these documents in the language that the contract specifies for communication, unless told otherwise. Next is preparation of contractor's documents. The contractor needs to prepare all the documents mentioned above. They also need to create any other documents that are necessary for instructing their workers. Next is right of inspection by employer's personnel. The employer's team has the right to check how these documents are being prepared, no matter where the preparation is taking place. Next is submission for engineer's review approval. If the employer's requirements say so, the contractor has to send certain documents to the engineer to look over and possibly approve. Next is submit with notice of compliance. When submitting a document for review, the contractor must also send a notice saying that the document is ready for review and use, and whether it meets the contract requirements or not. Next is review period not exceeding 21 days. The engineer has up to 21 days to review the document from the time they receive it, and the notice from the contractor. Next is engineer reviews documents. Now, the engineer checks the documents to see if they meet the contract standards. Next is decision point. Is the document compliant? The engineer must decide if the document follows the contract rules. Next is if non-compliant. Engineer's notice of non-compliance. If the document doesn't meet the standards, the engineer will tell the contractor what's wrong. Next is rectification and resubmission at contractor's cost. The contractor must fix the issues and send the document back for another review, and they have to pay for any costs involved in this process. Next is if compliant. Engineer's approval. If the document meets the standards, the engineer will approve it, which may come with comments or without. Next is execution in accordance with reviewed documents. The contractor can start work according to the documents that have been reviewed and approved. Next is notice by contractor for design document modification. If the contractor wants to change a design or document that was already submitted, they must tell the engineer right away. Next is submission of revised documents. The contractor must send in the changed documents following the same process as before. Next is deemed approval after review period expiry. If the engineer doesn't respond within the 21-day review period, the document is considered approved. Next is engineer requests further documents. If the engineer decides that more documents are needed, they will ask the contractor to make them. Next is contractor prepares documents promptly. The contractor must quickly prepare any additional documents the engineer asks for. Next is approval does not relieve contractor of responsibility. It's important to note that just because the engineer approves a document, it doesn't mean the contractor is off the hook for making sure everything is done right according to the contract. This is the end of the process for handling contractors' documents, according to Clause 5.2. Moving on to Clause 5.4 Technical Standards and Regulations Flowchart. Starting node. Clause 5.4 Technical Standards and Regulations. This is the starting point of the clause that sets out the requirements for the design, documentation, execution, and completion of the works to comply with various standards and laws. Next is design and works compliance. The contractor must ensure that the design, the contractor's documents, the execution of the work, and the completed works all comply with the required standards and laws. Next is compliance with country's technical standards and laws. The works must adhere to the technical standards, building codes, environmental laws, and other relevant laws of the country where the project is located. Next is compliance with standards specified in employer's requirements. The works must also comply with any other standards that are specifically mentioned in the employer's requirements. Next is standards applicable as per laws on base date. The reference to any published standards in the contract is understood to be to the addition of those standards that were in effect on the base date, which is a set reference date agreed upon in the contract. Next is if new standards after base date. This is a decision point. If new standards or changes to existing standards come into force after the base date, the process moves to the next step. Next is contractor notifies engineer of changes. The contractor must inform the engineer if new or changed standards are applicable. Next is engineer determines compliance need. The engineer must decide whether the works need to comply with the new or changed standards. Next is proposals for compliance as variation. If the engineer determines that compliance with the new or changed standards is required, and this compliance would result in a change to the works, a variation, the process moves to the next step. Next is engineer initiates variation per Clause 13. The engineer will initiate a variation in accordance with Clause 13, which deals with changes to the contract terms, variations and adjustments. Next is continue without variation. If the engineer determines that compliance with the new or changed standards is not required, the works will continue without any variation. Last is, this marks the end of the process outlined in Clause 5.4. Moving on to Clause 5.5 Training Flowchart. Starting node. Clause 5.5 Training. This marks the beginning of the clause that outlines the contractor's obligation to provide training to the employer's personnel. Next is contractor provides training. The contractor is responsible for carrying out training for the employer's personnel. Next is training as specified in employer's requirements. The extent and nature of the training are as specified in the employer's requirements document. Next is training specified before taking over. This is a decision point. The contract will specify whether the training needs to be completed before the works are officially handed over to the employer. Next is training must be completed before taking over. If the contract specifies that training is required before taking over, then the training sessions must be carried out and completed before the works can be considered ready for handover. Next is works not completed until training done. The works will not be considered as completed for the purposes of taking over until the specified training has been fully carried out. Next is proceed to taking over process. If the training is not specified to be completed before taking over, the process moves towards the taking over of the works under subclause 10.1. Last is taking over under subclause 10.1. This marks the end of the process, leading to the taking over of the works by the employer, which is governed by subclause 10.1 of the contract. Moving on to clause 5.6 as-built documents flowchart. Starting node. Clause 5.6 as-built documents. This is the beginning of the clause that outlines the contractor's responsibility to prepare a record of the works as they were actually built. Next is prepare as-built records. The contractor is required to create a complete set of records that document the actual construction of the works. Keep records up to date. These records must be regularly updated to reflect the current state of the works as they are being executed. Records show exact as-built details. The records should accurately show the exact locations, sizes, and details of the works as they have been constructed. Keep records on site for subclause use. The as-built records should be kept on the construction site and used solely for the purposes outlined in this specific subclause. Supply 2 copies to engineer before tests on completion. Before the commencement of any tests that are conducted to confirm the completion of the works, the contractor must provide 2 copies of these records to the engineer. Supply as-built drawings for engineer's review. In addition to the records, The contractor must also supply as-built drawings to the engineer for review, as per the requirements of Subclause 5.2. Obtain engineer's consent on details. The contractor needs to get the engineer's approval on the size, referencing system, and other details of the as-built drawings. Supply specified copies before taking over certificate. Before the taking over certificate can be issued, the contractor must supply the engineer with the specified number and types of copies of the as-built drawings, as required by the employer's requirements. Works not completed until engineer receives documents. The works are not considered to be completed, and thus cannot be officially taken over, until the engineer has received all the necessary as-built documents. And taking over under Subclause 10.1. This marks the conclusion of the process, leading to the official taking over of the works by the employer, as governed by Subclause 10.1. Moving on to Clause 5.7 Operation and Maintenance Manuals Flowchart. Starting node. Clause 5.7 Operation and Maintenance Manuals. This is the starting point of the clause detailing the contractor's obligation to provide manuals for the operation and maintenance of the plant. Next is supply provisional manuals before tests on completion. The contractor must supply provisional operation and maintenance manuals to the engineer before the commencement of the tests on completion. Provisional manuals for employer's operation and maintenance. These provisional manuals should contain enough detail to allow the employer to operate, maintain, dismantle, reassemble, adjust, and repair the plant. Final manuals required for taking over. For the works to be considered complete for the purpose of taking over, the contractor must provide final operation and maintenance manuals. Engineer receives final detailed manuals. The engineer must receive these final detailed manuals, which should meet the requirements specified in the employer's requirements. Works not completed until receipt of manuals. The works are not deemed completed for the purposes of taking over until the engineer has received the final operation and maintenance manuals. And taking over under Subclause 10.1. This is the end of the process. The taking over of the works by the employer is contingent upon the engineer's receipt of the final manuals, as governed by Subclause 10.1.
Now this is where things get interesting. This flowchart is complete overview of Clause 5 design. Based on previous explanation of each clause, I am sure you all can understand the sequence of the activities and which clause comes into action. But I want to explain the nature of interconnectedness of Clause 5.1, General Design Obligations, and Clause 4.7, Setting Out. Here's how they are connected. Clause 5.1 focuses on the contractor's responsibility for the design of the works. This includes ensuring that the design is carried out by qualified professionals and that the design itself meets the requirements set out by the employer. It sets the stage for all the design-related activities that the contractor must undertake and be responsible for. Clause 4.7 deals with the physical realization of the design on the construction site, known as setting out. The contractor is responsible for accurately translating the design into physical form on the site, using the points, lines, and levels of reference provided in the contract or by the engineer. If there are any errors in these references, the contractor is expected to use reasonable efforts to verify their accuracy before using them to set out the works. The link between these clauses is the contractor's overarching responsibility for both the design and the accurate physical execution of that design on the site. If errors in the provided reference points lead to delays or additional costs that an experienced contractor could not have reasonably foreseen, the contractor is entitled to claim additional time and costs under the provisions of Clause 20.1, Contractors' Claims. In the flow of project activities, the contractor would first ensure that the design is correct and approved, as per Clause 5.1, and then proceed to set out the works according to the design, using the reference points provided, as per Clause 4.7. If the reference points are incorrect, the contractor must address this with the engineer and may be entitled to adjustments in the contract terms if these errors lead to delays or additional costs. Now let me explain the flowchart where the clause 4.7, setting out, comes into action while dealing with clause 5.1, general design obligations. Clause 4.7 setting out. Once the design is ready, the contractor must accurately transfer the design onto the physical site, a process known as setting out. This involves using specific reference points to position parts of the works correctly. Contractor sets out works correctly. The contractor is responsible for ensuring that all parts of the works are positioned accurately according to the design. Verify reference points accuracy. Before using the reference points provided for setting out the works, the contractor must verify that they are accurate. This is to prevent any errors in the construction due to incorrect reference points. Rectify any errors in setting out. If the contractor finds any errors in the positioning of the works, they are responsible for rectifying these errors to ensure the construction aligns with the design. Error in reference points. If the contractor discovers that the error is in the reference points provided by the employer or notified by the engineer, they must notify the engineer. Contractor gives notice to engineer. This step involves formally notifying the engineer about the error in the reference points. If error unforeseeable, claim extension and costs. If an experienced contractor could not have reasonably discovered the error in the reference points, the contractor is entitled to claim an extension of time and/or additional costs. Engineer determines claim validity. The engineer reviews the claim to determine whether the error was indeed unforeseeable and whether the contractor is entitled to an extension of time and/or additional costs. And adjustments to contract if necessary. If the engineer agrees with the contractor's claim, adjustments to the contract terms, such as an extension of time or additional payment, may be necessary. That is all for today. If you have any doubts or suggestions, please do comment below. Hope this video is informative and educating for you. If so, click that like Tune PS Up button and hit the bell icon. Be proactive and never stop learning. Thank you watching the video.